Ever wanted to get into flair bartending? This is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome to the BartenderHQ.com podcast with me, your host, as usual, David Eden-Sangwell. And on this show, we will be talking about how to get started right from the beginning at flair bartending. A couple of weeks ago, I did a question and answer session for the guys over on the Craft Bartender Forum, the Craft Bartender Community run by the guys from Mixology Talk over on their Facebook page. So we will be going through some of the questions and answers that we did over there. But first, a little bit of industry news. The latest industry news from BartenderHQ. So first and foremost, there's only a couple of stories that I want to talk about this week. There's not actually been a huge amount that's caught my eye. So the first one that I have got here for you is that there is a Vegas museum opening a Prohibition style distillery. Now that's going to be quite interesting. It's going to be talking about all of the bootlegging and all of the kind of history of drinking that was going on around at the time of Prohibition. It looks like they've got a beautiful still set up in there as well, so that is going to be well worth a visit if you are in Las Vegas. One other piece of sad news that's come out this week is the industry is mourning the loss of Whistlepig's Dave Pickerell. Now, I am in no way an expert on this guy. I know he worked with Maker's Mark and then further down the line Whistlepig. But our friend over on the Bartender Journey podcast, Brian Weber, has got an interview with Dave Pickerell on his latest podcast, Remembering Dave. So please, if you are interested and you want to kind of remember this great guy from the whiskey industry in the US, do go and check out Bartender Journey's interview with Dave Pickerell. So, apologies that there was no podcast last week, guys. It was just a crazy week. I spent a week up in Blackpool with the family. Obviously, we were at the Flair competition over at NoHo in Manchester. I was absolutely intending to get a podcast out to you guys. However, things didn't work in my favour. We got back from Blackpool. I was working Friday close, Saturday close, Sunday all day. I had Monday off, and then Tuesday was the Bartender Challenge, which we'll come to in a bit when we're talking about Flair, and it just kind of got away with me. I did try to record some audio while I was at the gym, because I got to the gym on, I think, Sunday night, and the place was completely deserted. I literally had the entire gym to myself at 1 AM, and I tried to record some audio there. It didn't sound good enough, and I was kind of stumbling over words and things because I didn't really have anything planned, and it would have only been a 5-minute kind of fill-in podcast anyway. So I decided to give it a miss, and we are back in full flow this week. So as I say, the main thing that's been going on at Bartender HQ this week is I have been super busy working. I have managed to get a few recipes up on the website, so if you are interested in those ODK recipes using the purees that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago from the Birmingham Hoteliers, those recipes you can now find on BartenderHQ.com. Okay, so we did a questions and answers session for the guys over on the Craft Bartender Community, and here is some of the stuff that was asked. So initially, Julia got in touch with me from a bar above and the Mixology Talk podcast, and asked me if I would do this. I was obviously very happy to do that because flair bartending is one of those things that I'm super passionate about. I love to talk about it, and I love to be involved with it. And so this is the Q&A that we had. So I will we'll run through some of the questions, some of the answers that we gave, and also if you want to join the Craft Bartender Community, head over to, I believe it is barabove.com/group. So the first one kind of came from Julia, and it was to get the conversation started a little bit. If you wanted to start learning flair bartending, what is the easiest or best move to start with? Now my answer here was as follows. The best place to start is with things that you can't break. The napkin spin onto your hand is super easy, grabs your guest's attention super easily. Also, throwing garnishes over your shoulder into a drink is a great way to learn the basics. So all I'm saying here is that you don't need to start off flipping bottles, flipping glass bottles, which you could be breaking quite simply. It doesn't take a huge amount of force to actually break a glass bottle, and especially if your bar is not necessarily set up for flair bartending, i.e. it doesn't have the rubber mats on the floor, it does not have you know, speed rails and your well spirits with speed pours on. If your business requires you to pour using jiggers, or if that's something that you prefer in terms of your style of service, then the first thing you're going to want to do is not going to be throwing full bottles of liquor around. When you can get started really simply by flipping the bev naps, if you spin them kind of frisbee style, you can get them to land on the back of your hand, then turn it over and place it on the bar top in front of your guests. It's a really cool little move that you can easily do, and it really stands out in your guest's mind. It's one of the first things that they'll see when they come up to your bar, because obviously we should be getting those bev naps down in front of your guests, assuming you still use them in your bar. I know a lot of the bars are now moving away from having disposable things in general. There's a kind of extension of the idea of getting rid of straws for cocktails and things like that. If you're not using bev naps, obviously this doesn't apply to you, but you will still have garnishes. So like things like where you squeeze a lime over a drink, give it a squeeze, pop it over your shoulder, it flies over your shoulder, it lands in the glass. Nice and easy. Also, if you're holding the glass fairly high up, that makes it basically the equivalent of catching the garnish in your hand more than in the glass. Now, before people start writing comments in, I'm fully aware that when we're serving our drinks, we should be keeping our hands away from the top of the glass. In Flair Bartending, some of those rules go out of the window a little bit. You are able to grab things in different ways, because obviously you need to manipulate these tools and the glassware and the garnishes and things like that. What is important though is that you keep your hands clean and wash them very regularly throughout your shift. So Julia replied, yep, good call in starting with unbreakable items. It's like you know me. Can you recommend any YouTube channels? So yeah, there are a few YouTube channels out there. One of the best ones that I found as well is Zach Prohaska's Flair. Flair is a brilliant channel. I recommend you will check it out. He's got moves for everyone from the complete novice through to competition bartenders, full routines. I believe he's got courses that he offers as well, as video courses and probably in-person stuff, but definitely check out uflair.com. The other place, if you really want to become a bit more serious about your flair bartending, is the World Flair Association. So the World Flair Association, many moons ago, we spoke to Tom Dyer, who was one of the founding guys at the World Flair Association. Now, they have courses that they run at the European Bartender Schools, and they have grading days that they do in various places. But essentially, they have taken the concept of martial arts with yellow belt, white belt, green belt, blue belt, black belts, all that kind of thing, and they have transferred it over to bartending. So there are certain levels of flair course that they run, and when you complete, when you join, you will be brought in at the white shaker level. When you complete your first course, that is the yellow shaker, and it goes up in there. The first 4 or 5, I believe, are done on a grading system, and then following that, it's based on placings in WFA Grand Slam competition. So one of the other questions that was asked, Flair has a bit of a reputation for being something you see in nightclubs and not so much in craft bars. Are there any moves that work with craft, in craft style bars? Absolutely there are. I mean, you're not probably going to be doing full exhibition flair stuff. However, the kind of tight stuff that you can do with tin sets, especially if you're using tin on tin shakers, your ice scoops, icing up your shakers, all of this stuff is super useful and super appropriate to use in craft bars. Even things though like spinning a bar spoon in your fingers, pouring the jigger backhand, which is used in almost every bar, I think, that wants to do kind of a fancy looking presentation. That is the sort of stuff that is definitely flair in my mind. Whether it's something that you guys consider as flair when you're doing it is an absolutely different matter. But I would certainly say that if you're spinning bar spoons in your fingers, you are flairing. Andy Johnson asked us, what style of cocktails is the easiest to start cocktail flairing with? Now, as far as I'm concerned, you can do it with absolutely anything. However, you probably want to do it with shaking cocktails, because then you've got access to using your shaker tins and your Boston tins, that kind of thing. Also, you don't probably want to be doing stuff that not flaring hugely with stirred drinks. It's very weird kind of stirred stuff. Also, you don't want to be, aerating the spirits that you're going to potentially put into a stirred cocktail. Part of the the beauty of a stirred cocktail is the texture, and that could be affected a little bit if you do a full kind of Flair routine with your bottle of gin. Anyone that believes in the whole gin being bruised by shaking, I personally don't, but if that's something that you believe in, then shaking, throwing around your bottle of gin ahead of pouring it is probably not going to be something that you want to do. Chris Tunstall as well from the Mixology Talk podcast asked, okay, silly question, but why is it that the liquid doesn't go flying out of the bottles? Now, this is something that is very much physics based. I mean, we can't break the laws of physics by bartending, but there are certainly different parts of the move repertoire that we have as a bartender, as a Flair bartender, that will work with a bottle that is more than half full, and other stuff that works with maybe an ounce or so left in the bottom of the bottle. Now, what we call a full bottle move would be something like working Flair, and that's also a name that we use for things where you can do it with basically any bottle that you pick up, or any tool, any bar tool, any shaker, spoons, things like that. All the kind of stuff that you can do quite easily while you're actually working your shift, and you're not having to worry about spilling. Now, anything that we do with just about an ounce left in the bottom of the bottle is what we would term as exhibition Flair. That is the kind of big moves where you're doing multiple flips, multiple rotations to a bottle. If you're going to misdirect it and tap it back in a different direction mid-flow, that is exhibition Flair. And this is the kind of stuff that most bartenders will reserve for a competition. This is the stuff that we would not be doing necessarily, certainly not with every bottle as you pick it up to make a drink. Now, there's definitely a place for exhibition Flair behind the bar, but it is the occasion as opposed to the rule of the working Flair that we can do. We can literally pick up any bottle. So if I was to pick up this Falernum, for example, which is sort of around about half full, and you can actually push it around and keep the liquid forced down towards the bottom. Essentially, if this bottle was going to fall with the neck downwards, I need to push it downwards faster than the liquid would fall out in order to keep that liquid inside the bottle and not coming out through the pour spout. All these bottles that we're working with are not sealed in any way. They do have a free-flowing pour spout on the top, which allows us to catch the bottle into a pour and the liquid comes straight out. There's no sort of trickery in terms of stopping the liquid from coming out, other than you basically need to beat gravity. The main thing that also keeps smaller amounts of liquid in the bottle when you flip it around is the same principle as if you swing the bucket of water around your head quickly enough. The centrifugal force is what everyone calls it. It's technically centripetal acceleration, because that is what is pushing it out towards the outside of its circle. It's the same reason that when you go on a roller coaster which has a loop, as you get to the top of the loop, you don't feel like you're falling out of your seat. You're actually pushed down into your seat because the track is actually accelerating you back towards the centre of the circle. It's a bit of a weird one to get your head around, but that is technically how it works. You're trying to go in a straight line, and the track is forcing you to change direction, so you're pushed into your seat. So moving on from those little questions that we had there, I do want to talk a little bit more about Flair in general and TGI Fridays and where I think I see Flair going. I mean, this last week we had the TGI Fridays Bartender Championship, I believe it's called now, rather than the Challenge. But essentially it's the same as it's always been. You have a Best Bartender category and a Best Individual Flair category, which I believe they this year are calling the Greatest Showman because they're doing a lot of tie-in stuff this year. But essentially the Best Bartender category is the 10 best bartenders across all categories, including free pouring accuracy, recipe knowledge, food knowledge from the restaurant, the Fridays history, liquor trivia, the whole gamut, and obviously Flair as well, and showmanship. And then the individual Flair is literally a 5-minute Flair routine set to music, I think generally creating 2 drinks. And that was held at the store where I'm working at the moment, TGI Fridays on the Hagley Road, the original TGI Fridays in the UK. Gary from our Derby restaurant won Best Bartender overall and will be going out to the US, to Dallas, to represent the UK in the World Championships. And my friend Brian Sanderson, not Brian Flanagan, won the Best Individual Flair, and his routine that he did at Know How in Manchester is actually up on our Facebook page, so you can go and see that. It's also on the YouTube channel. Go and check it out. It's basically the same routine, but I wasn't able to film it on the day because I was slinging drinks behind the bar. So I guess the thing we need to come to now is the top 5 ways to get involved in Flair. Top 5 starting moves, let's say. So I think the first one, as I mentioned earlier, would be the napkin spin. You essentially take a bev nap, one of the paper napkins. You grab it along the folded edge between your finger and thumb, with the fold coming out away from your finger and thumb. You spin it into the air like a frisbee, like a helicopter, and get your hand underneath it, let it land, float down onto your hand, then turn your hand over, place that on the bar top. It looks awesome. It's one of these little kind of flourish moves that will just get your guests' attention, and I think it is one of the strongest things that anyone really does with Flair bartending behind the bar. Number 2, as I again mentioned earlier, is the garnish toss. So you're going to take your lime or your lemon, you squeeze it into the top of your drink in front of you, and then throw it behind your back, over your shoulder. It lands in the drink. Your guest goes crazy. It's a brilliant little way to get attention again at the end, as you're about to take payment and ask for your money for these drinks when they are potentially going to also tip you. Number 3, okay, this is the basic flip to pour. So you're going to have the bottle in your hand upright with your fist, with your thumb upwards on the bottle. So you're holding it in a regular way as if you're about to pour. Turn your hand over and pour the liquid. What you're going to then do is let the bottle rotate around the outside of your hand, do a 1.5 rotations, so I guess that's a 540 in the air, and it's going to fall into your hand in a reverse grip, so the bottle is essentially upside down compared to where it was. Your hand is the same way up as it was when you started. I will chuck little clips of this over the top on our YouTube channel. Number 4 is going to be tossing a glass over your shoulder and catching it behind your back. So whereas with the garnish we were throwing behind our back and catching in front, we are going to this time throw from in front of us with the glass from the bar top, and we're going to catch it behind our back in the other hand. Now I generally would recommend that you do your throwing with your strongest hand here and allow your weaker hand probably to catch, because you're not going to be able to see where this is going anyway, and all you need to do is learn exactly how much you need to give that glassware energy so that it lands in the right place behind your back. These tricks are more about getting the throw right than getting the catch right. If you get the throw right, you will just be there waiting for whatever it is that you've launched into the air to land exactly where you expect it to be. Fingers crossed. And our 5th and final move is going to be a straw flip. Now, if you are using plastic straws in your bar, please reconsider and move on to either a paper alternative, or, as we mentioned in our big bumper sustainability episode, you can use pasta straws, you can use bamboo, there are steel straws out there that you can get nowadays. Just please don't be using regular plastic. You can also get biodegradable plastics now, or what looks and feels like a plastic. Grab that straw in your caddy and you're going to flip it from one hand to the other. It can do 1 or 2 rotations, it really doesn't matter. Even 1.5 doesn't matter with the straw, because it's the same both ways up in most cases. Just flip it across your body, it's nice and visual, and again, it's just going into that drink immediately before you present it to your guest, so that wow is fresh in their mind when they're considering whether or not they're going to leave you a tip. Now, none of these moves that I've mentioned here take a lot of time, none of them are going to slow down your bartending, as long as you're using them responsibly. So, for you guys out there that have expressed worry about slowing down or annoying your guests, or your boss being concerned about these things, none of the stuff that I've mentioned here, apart from that one flip to pour, is actually involving any liquor. So if they're worried about costs increasing, you're only really playing around with garnishes and things like that, I think you're going to be fine. If you want to see videos of all of these things, do check out our YouTube version of this. If you're watching the YouTube version already, congratulations, you've just watched them all. Okay guys, now a couple of little things when you're doing these moves and when you're certainly getting first started. Anything that you're doing behind your back or over your shoulder or in a place where you cannot see it, start off using something unbreakable. So if you want to learn the glass toss over your shoulder to catch behind the back, start it off by using a Boston tin and try and make sure that your area that you're working in or practicing in is free of anything breakable. The tin is not going to make, it's not going to break, it's not going to be damaged if you drop it on the floor. However, things around it may be, so don't have stacks of glassware around you, don't have small children, animals, anything like that. The stuff that I'm mentioning to do with a bottle, if you can find yourself a plastic Flair bottle to practice with, that is a great idea. If not, grab yourself some insulating tape or any kind of sticky tape, in all fairness, wrap that bottle up, and then if the worst happens, you drop it and it does break, everything is going to be contained within that tapey goodness. And I think that kind of covers it. Now, there is an article which I will link to on BartenderHQ, which is essentially how to build yourself a free Flair practice kit that explains in a bit more detail all of these things about wrapping up bottles, how to make sure that you're not going to trash your whole house when you first start to learn. There's a cheap alternative to regular bounce mats that you would be using in a restaurant as well, if you need to protect the flooring in your practice area. But do check that out, guys, and I hope that you find it useful. That's going to be it for me, but if you want any more information on Flair bartending or anything else bartending wise in general, please do get in touch, drop us a tweet, hit us up on the Facebook page. You can find us, and I will see you on the next BartenderHQ.com podcast.